Yes, Farm is the energy generated by basketball players.
We got to raise the rates.
Just even if you could get a little energy from every time somebody says the word.
Next day it was 60.
All right, welcome everyone.
All right.
5 o'clock, tonight's meeting, July 18th, Select Board. Welcome, we have Bill Kennedy, Bill Taylor, I'm Tyler Ward, Nicole McStair, Town Administrator, and Allie Kreutz, Assistant to the Town Administrator. I know several of you know each other in the audience, we all know each other. But if you have any questions or would like to speak, just when chosen, state your name for the record, for the minutes. We are being filmed, right? We're on air today?
Yes,
we're actually on air?
Yep.
Okay. So if you forget anything that happened tonight, you can look back at all the archive. Tonight, Seth MacLean is here with fire station update and architect recommendation for that project. We're looking to move forward with EECBG grant application. It's exciting. And then we may appoint Mr. McGill as an alternate to the planning board. Vote to accept Peterborough Jaffrey Regional Supply and Interconnection Operations and Management Agreement. That's another exciting project on our horizon. And then the big money, $25,000 lead service grant from NHES.
Actually, I'd like to make an amendment to that. It's not the lead service grant.
Oh.
These things, actually, we have 2 grants from DES. They both have the same grant number attached to them, which is why I confused them. So this is actually $25,000 for the source water mapping.
Okay, I was wondering about it when I read
Yes.
through the packet and there was nothing
That's
about
why.
lead pipes.
That's right. Because it's all about the source water mapping.
But can we go for the lead thing?
We've already applied for it. We're waiting to hear back on that one as well.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for correcting
Yep,
that.
sorry about
And then,
that.
Then we have minutes from June 6th and 27th to possibly approve. All right. What do you say, Seth?
I'm ready.
Great to see you.
You as well, thank you. I like to stand, as everybody knows at this point. I'm not much of a sitter when we're presenting, so thank you for coming tonight. There's quite a few people that have been heavily involved in this process so far that are here. I will make them known as we go through this, but a couple things to do with the fire station project tonight. I'm going to give a project update. I'm going to discuss the worst kept secret since it was in the paper this morning. and a recommendation to formalize our committee, our RFQ selection team to an actual building committee at this point. So this is the update from July of 2023, if you wouldn't mind. I put this slide up the last 2 times. I'm going to keep putting this up through the entire process. I won't go through everybody's name, but the just sheer number of people that have worked on this specific project over the last 2 years, starting from selection last time through last couple of years worth of planning, leading to the most recent iteration, the formation of our new team and our new direction on this project. And I think it's worth mentioning just how many people from the community have been involved in this, how many people from the staff have been supporting this. I won't read them all, but at your leisure, please. And if you know some of these people, thank them because they've put a lot of work into this over the last couple of years. Most of our soon-to-be hopefully building committee are here tonight, and they've put tremendous work into this project. And I think a successful municipal project is led by the residents themselves working in concert with the staff. So huge thank you. Next slide, please. As a quick reminder, the peterborough.projects.info site has a lot of the information dating back to 2004 that talks about when this process started, going on 2 decades ago at this point. If you're interested in any of this and how we got to where we are today, I would encourage you to go to that site, look through some of these studies. We'll continue to add to this as we go through the process so that information is updated, and you can probably see some revisions to how we disseminate information digitally in the near future as we move through this project. So I'll leave it at that for now. Like I said, I've already gone through all these things a couple times. If you're interested, happy to talk at any point, take questions, but I'll keep moving through to the real agenda item tonight. If you could go to the next slide, please. This slide's going to get familiar because we're going to keep adding to it. As we make more decisions as a community and the staff is given that direction, we'll keep adding to this. I'm going to read through these really quick just so everybody's on the same page here. The select board are the owners of this project. They will be provided with regular updates, such as tonight, and will formally decide on all relevant considerations leading to public vote in May of 2024. Caveat being, if we're not ready for a vote in May of 2024, we will not be asking the community to consider something they're not ready to consider. but we're still aiming, our target is still to try to get through the budget process this year and get us to town meeting next year to consider a fire station for Peterborough. Peterborough is committed to the development of a new fire station to be located on Elm Street, so the site has been chosen. We know where we're going to try and do this thing. Future contracted service providers will be tasked with validating or revising the prior programmatic study, and that programmatic information will be delivered in a meaningful and easy to understand format for our community to understand why it is we're building or considering building what we need to build based on what we provide for service. The new station will be designed to accommodate that validated and revised program the department currently delivers, with some considerations for future growth. Our community is changing, the fire service is changing, and we need to be mindful of that as we design a new facility, so we're not asking to design another facility in 20 or 30 years. So that's something we're going to task our architect team with, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The community expects a project that balances programmatic need with financial viability. Goes without saying. We need to be able to afford it. It needs to meet our needs as a community, but we need to be able to afford the project as taxpayers, of which I'm also in this community. The community expects a strong public process that solicits and utilizes community input. That's what we're doing, working with volunteers on this, and we'll continue to do so. This project's about to move, once we get through the architecture selection, which will make a recommendation tonight, into soliciting public input, gathering that input, and trying to utilize that input to develop something that our community can be proud of. The project will utilize construction management for final project delivery. Harvey Construction has been retained for pre-construction services. We have not retained them for the construction of the facility because we don't have a bond to construct it yet. They're helping guide us through the process at this point, bringing their professional expertise to the table and helping us make informed decisions about what makes sense for our community. We're engaging with experts. The select board, with guidance of the budget committee and CIP, have set a target of no more than 70% of the bonding capacity for the construction phase of this project. Presently, I don't think there's been any change there yet. That's anticipated to be around $12 million maximum. That's a known fact, and so we're including that at this point. Next slide, please.
Seth, if I may break in just really quickly, should we make some mention of the concept of integrated campus up at the Elm Street property there?
Well, the focus of this project is strictly the fire station, but I mean, we obviously are working on the DPW refurbishing, and we have been working for the last couple of years on the potential of updating repairing the community center. So I'm not ready to go forward yet and make recommendations on how the whole project's going to work quite yet, Bill. But those things are being considered as we go through this process, and especially as we talk to professional service providers.
So the architects are well aware of
yes. Oh, yes.
Future plans?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Summary of activities, May 2022 to present. I've gone through this slide twice. I won't go through it ad nauseum now, but starting in May of the prior year, when there was $2 million for design, engineering, and construction of a new fire station with authorized, meetings started from there. Individual meetings with select board, and individual meetings and select board workshops, meetings with stakeholders in the community, fire department folks. I spent a good chunk of last summer traveling the state with members of the budget committee, now on our committee. Other members, Bill Taylor joined up for, I believe, every tour, and we toured all over, looking at other facilities, gathering resources, asking questions of town administrators, city managers, project managers, meeting construction managers, meeting anyone who would meet with us to show us their facility, tell us what went well, tell us what didn't go well, tell us what we should consider going forward. And we spent a lot of time researching so that we could try to figure out what makes sense for a community our size and what project delivery made most sense for this community. I won't read them all. We went on a number of tours. We may be doing actually another tour fairly soon, but that led us through the summer of learning last year up through October, when we had a pretty significant conversation about how much we're willing to spend as a community, what the target for this project should be, therefore providing us the guidance we would need to hire designers and construction managers to keep us within some target budget. We didn't feel a blank check would make much sense for this, and we needed to make sure that we were aiming at something that made sense for the community. Additional tours, additional meetings. Happy to share this at any point. Don't need to belabor these. This was the year prior. If we want to go to the next slide, we'll get into summary of activity since the last time I was here with the board. We selected Harvey Construction. We authorized us to negotiate a contract. We executed a contract for pre-construction work, and we have a contract on the table yet to be signed if we decide to go forward with them on construction if we're successful through this project. In April, we met with Monadnock Economic Development Corporation to talk about maybe if there's some other ways to look at financing on this. Let's see. started meeting to discuss the RFQ/P for architectural services. Committee met regularly, a lot of dialogue through email as well, starting with the draft, back to the committee for consideration, feedback, revisions, lots of edits, trying to get us down to, okay, this scope of service makes sense for what we're asking for as a community, making sure that we set the right starting point for whoever we select as an architect so that the expectation is clear on what we're looking for. And I'll get into a little bit more about what those expectations are in a minute. May continued work with the committee on RFQ/P for architectural services. For those who may not know, that's a request for qualifications and proposal. And again, I'll give you more details on what the actual meat of that document that we ended up sending out to providers, potential providers, looks like. In May, we went out to bid for architectural services after going through the process with the RFQ team. In May, we did an in-person session at the Elm Street site where we invited all the architect firms to come and look at the site, take pictures, ask questions, get a feel for what the project, and it was well attended. We held additional committee meetings to start working towards the selection process so that once the solicitations came back to the community, we had a basis for which we would try and impartially grade them to make sure that we're making a good decision on behalf of the community based on what we know about the project and what we think are the most important considerations as we make a very, very important selection for this project. In June, let's see, RFQ/P submissions, review scoring, and shortlisted for interviews. So our team met, considered all of the solicitations we got, rated those using a scoring matrix that we had developed as a group, and shortlisted for interviews. Out of 10 submissions, we interviewed 5 firms in this room, leading to July, where the chief and myself did some reference checks, checking on our top 2 selections, and then there was a committee deliberation very recently to select a top firm. Next slide, please. What were we asking for? Important. Scope of services for architect, reviewing and reconciling the established facility needs and programs. So again, that programmatic study, making sure that we set an expectation that we're expecting you to come in, look at what's been done, and revise what needs to get done. Revise anything that needs to happen in order to get us to where we need to be for a project. Making sure, again, we balance the money elements of this project with the needs of the community and the department. We asked them to consider the best use of the Elm Street property as relates to a new fire and ambulance station. Assess the condition and potential reuse of the existing motor pool building at the Elm Street site. We're calling this the motor pool building now. I've been calling it cold storage for a decade, but it's the little brick building that's sort of still sitting there that the Public Works Department stores a bunch of equipment in. We said, we think it's possibly of interest to see if we can incorporate this into the design as we move forward. So we set that expectation in our RFQ. Coordinating building siting and site development with the selected civil engineer, developing conceptual and schematic building design, analyzing of sustainable building options, green energy and other considerations, creating building floor plans, creating building elevations, developing a final facility report and narrative for public consideration. So that's where we get to our cost estimates and a chosen schematic design that our community could then consider. And guiding the project owner with advancing and presenting the project to Peterborough residents through a robust community outreach, should say community input and outreach, strategic plan, and its implementation, because one of the expectations we set was we want the architects to take the considerations of the community and incorporate them into the design as much as possible. It's a technical, important technical facility that has certain things we can't cut corners on, but our community needs to be able to weigh in on what this looks like and other considerations that make sense from that perspective. Next slide, please. Selection criteria. So we evaluated the proposals. I'm still talking about the paper version of this, not the interviews. So we evaluated the proposals based on the following. We did our best to grade these. Demonstrated experience designing fire stations, municipal facilities, and public buildings of similar size and scope. Quality of the proposal, including how it was organized, completeness, relevance, and conciseness. Qualifications of the design team to lead this project. Demonstrated ability to assess facility needs and create realistic project budgets and develop a final design that maintains those through all stages. Demonstrated ability to analyze and incorporate sustainable design strategies into a municipal project. Demonstrated ability to lead public input and outreach campaigns. Responsive references, and creativity in conceiving unique design solutions in fire stations and other municipal projects. Selection process. Meetings were held in April to discuss the RFQ/P and related scoring documentation. So kind of stepping back here a little bit, the RFQ was put out to bid between the dates of 5/16 and 6/2. We invited firms to put their best proposals together, qualifications and proposal packages. Gave them a couple weeks to do so. Like I said, we held an in-person session with those firms that showed interest on the 23rd of May. We received the submissions. We received 10 in total. Very, very good response. A lot of interest in this project. Let's see, interview selection, RQ submission review and interview selection occurred on June 8th, where we considered the 10 proposals that were submitted, and the committee deliberated and chose what they felt to be the 5 strongest firms. The firms were LaValle Bresinger Architects, Warren Street Architects, Shearmer Crystal Paulson, which is abbreviated SMP, Northeast Collaborative Architects, NCA, and Mitchell Associates Architects. In-person interviews were then conducted in this room with our committee between the 26th and 28th of June. Committee then deliberated a week or 2 weeks after that, given the holiday, and unanimously selected SMP Architecture based out of Concord, New Hampshire for the recommendation. Next slide, please. A couple things about the interview. The interviews were 1 hour and 15 minutes in length, again happened in this room. We asked for a 40-minute presentation from the architectural firm, and then we followed that up with a pre-developed list of questions that the committee had worked on for about 30-35 minutes afterward. We asked all the firms the same questions, and we graded them based on their presentation and their responses to our questions. Firms were asked to present on the following: what sets your firm apart? Relevant experience working on publicly funded projects of similar size and scope. We wanted specific thoughts and ideas about Peterborough site, including the potential reuse of the motor pool building. We wanted their intentions relative to reconciling the present programmatic study that was completed by HKT Architects a couple of years ago at this point. We wanted specific public engagement strategies. We wanted to see proposed fees for pre-construction and construction phases of the project. We wanted to see strategies relative to the incorporation of alternative and green energy. And we wanted to see some accommodation for the need for future growth and change of the community and the fire department, as I previously mentioned. Like I said, SMP went through the process. I won't belabor it. We felt as a team unanimously that SMP provided the best possible package for Peterborough based on what we knew about our project heading up to that point. They emphasized the public outreach component of this, their willingness to listen to the community and incorporate design elements, and I believe it was a completely unanimous decision that they made the most sense for us based on where we're at with this project at this point. So tonight, the consideration is the board allowing myself to enter negotiations with SMP to develop a agreement that works for our budget, works for our program. We'll get to the formalization of a building committee momentarily. Next steps would be finished in architecture, assuming you're in favor of moving forward with the committee's recommendation. Next steps would be formalization of the building committee, which we can hopefully also do tonight. And then if everything goes well and you folks are you see this as the good path forward, building committee would then meet with the architecture and construction management team to begin developing the public input and outreach campaign, develop schedule and key milestones. My anticipation is if all goes well, we can negotiate a contract that works for our budget, that makes sense based on the pre-construction and post-construction fees that we're anticipating, that then the architect and construction management team would be joining us for a meeting in this room to meet with the select board and any community members that want to come out. And at that point, giving us enough time to start working through key dates, making sure that we've started to think about our public input and outreach campaign, get pen to paper and start getting this campaign really moving and outward to the community. We could jump to the next slide. I suppose maybe jump back one more. Any questions about the process so far? I'll get into the building committee in a moment. And I would also implore the building committee, or soon to be hopefully building committee, selection team still for another couple minutes. If you have anything you wanted to offer there as well. Assume the chair is okay with that.
I have a comment.
Okay, great.
First of all, I want to congratulate Seth. He did a great job putting this together. And secondly, I want to congratulate the team for all the hard work that they've done. And I also want to point out to the community that these members of the team are not exactly wallflowers. They're very opinionated, they do their homework, they work hard at it, and the fact that they came up with a unanimous decision It's going to push me over the edge. I'm not gonna-
Well, if that doesn't, I will.
Thanks. Yeah, Rick?
Yeah, Rick Lesser. Earlier you mentioned, Seth, you talked with MADC, I believe it was,
Yes.
about alternate funding. Did anything relevant
Nothing
come out of that conversation?
really came from that conversation. It may be something worth exploring as we get into a little more formal discussions about financing mechanisms, but from that very brief meeting, Carl, myself, Lily, and Mandy were part of that. I think I speak for everyone saying there wasn't much that came from that at this point.
And as far as you mentioned the motor pool building, so what's going on with, maybe this information is public, but I don't know, as far as renovating DPW, is that not part of their plan? Are you building a whole new
I'm still
building?
working through that right now, yeah.
So that could go either way, basically.
That project
The
is
motor
definitely
pool.
moving forward. We're
No, I mean the
developing
motor
plans
pool.
now. I'll be making a recommendation to the board very soon on that project.
Okay, and then just finally, are there dollars involved here with these bids? I mean, did they also say,
They
in
did.
addition to everything else, this is what our estimates could be as far as the cost?
They ranged. I mean, we're going to negotiate a contract, assuming the board's good with that, so I would kind of leave it at that for now, but they do range on the, I'll just give a range. On the pre-construction, sort of pre-construction phase architecture range anywhere from $55,000 to $130,000. And then the fees on the construction end for architects range anywhere from 5.5% to 9%. But it's a little difficult, as every architect firm pointed out, without going through design development, it's hard to really know where that number's going to land. You've got to negotiate just how involved they're going to be in the construction phase of that as well. You need to negotiate sub-consultants, their values, so a little tough to pin that one down quite yet.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I mean, there's still more to talk about, but for me, this process has been pretty incredible. And when anybody talks about forming another committee, I generally, get a little nauseous. But this one has been, like, incredible to work with. This team is, like, I can't imagine it going any better. I can't say enough about it, and I mean, Seth, first of all, the amount of information that you just threw out in a very short amount of time is incredible all in itself. But, I mean, what a presentation. This guy is incredible. This group, I just can't say enough about it. And the people that we have selected are such a good fit to work with our group. And they just feel like people that, they want to help us. They're not just in it because, they want to build stuff and have awards, and they're not just in it for the money. These people are like everyday people that you can talk to on the street, and they're just, the whole team, and the construction manager and the architects, it's like not what you would expect when you meet with these types of businesses. It's been great. I'll stop talking, but thanks to everybody. It's great.
Yeah, I would echo that. This group has been really great. We've been way in the weeds on this, trying to get it right on behalf of the community, and everybody's put the time in. Really impressive, and I very much appreciate the support, because it's a lot of work, and I don't think projects like this move particularly well without strong partnership between staff and the community. So couldn't say
The
enough.
time, the volunteer time that the people have put into this is really astronomical.
So, the recommendation currently stands. We need your authorization, assuming you'd like to go with the committee's recommendation, to begin negotiations, and if we reach favorable negotiation for the town, enter into agreement with SNP Architects.
And to authorize Seth to do that.
So moved. Can I just say that?
You want to second it, Bill?
Sure.
Sure, I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor
Aye.
of that? Yeah, great work.
That work will begin tomorrow with the architect, and my intent is to try and visit their office on Thursday to meet the rest of the staff and start penciling in some dates that we can then come back to our soon-to-be committee. We can move on to that one. So there'll be a lot more coming out, and like I said, assuming we can reach agreement, which I'm very comfortable we can, very quickly, my intent is to get everybody together, and they can introduce themselves to the community at this point, right here in this room, and we can have our first kickoff session with the community, with the architects, with the construction manager, and begin this thing for real at this point. So, not to discount the work that's already been done, but the next big hurdle is in front of us, so looking forward to it. That would lead to the second consideration on this. As I mentioned, we have been not a formal committee at this point, but everybody on the team so far has indicated a willingness and a desire to continue. I also agree, from my perspective, this has been a great team to work with. Bill took the words out of my mouth. People are committed, people are willing to put the time in, people are willing to be tough when they need to be tough, and that's really driven us to get to the right answers, the right documentation, and I have no doubt, from my perspective, will drive us to deliver a project that this community can be proud of, and that's the goal. So the folks that are, a lot of you are in the room, Bill Taylor's on the committee now. I'm recommending formalizing the team as the building committee to go all the way through this process at this point. And that would be Bill Taylor, Fire Chief Ed Walker, Budget Committee Chairman Carl Manzino, Sarah Steinberg-Heller, so the Planning Board, Tony Cassidy, I don't think Tony's here tonight, Energy Committee, Mandy Sliver is here, she's our town treasurer, she's on the Budget Committee, Carol Nelson, EDA Subcommittee, myself working with volunteers, myself and Ed really working with volunteers, but I do firmly believe that for this project to be something that this community can be proud of and to deliver a product that this community can get behind, it needs to be community driven, and this team is, I think, up to the task personally. We're going to need some additional support because this is going to move in a different direction. I'm sort of just making a couple call outs here. Danica Malone will get heavily involved in this process going forward. We keep her pretty busy with some other things, and there's a lot of considerations this group, which I'll talk about in a minute, are not really going to cross into her realm, but she'll be very, very pivotal in helping us to connect to the community, working with the architects, doing the public input and outreach sessions. Tim Hurley is here, did an outstanding job supporting this process from a practical construction perspective. Nobody works more with architects, and I probably work more engineers than you, but more architects than Tim, and his perspective in helping us get to this point has been incredible. But at this point, it is time for him to take a little step back because it's going to get into his actual duties, which are enforcing the code as we go through the design process, and it makes sense to for him to step off the committee formally, but to support the committee when design development's happening to make sure that we're putting good design forward and we're not missing anything or going to go back and revise. Deputy Chiefs Brad Winter and John Fahey are going to be working closely with Ed and the rest of the fire staff on the technical components and the layout of the building to make sure this works for the people that have to work in this building. And they'll be focused very heavily, including the chief, on the technical components of this. Gretchen deserves a lot of recognition. She's kept us organized. She's taken all of our minutes. She's helped us schedule the meetings. She's been incredibly helpful to this group. She'll be continuing to support the group as we move forward, making sure that all of our documentation is posted. As we get into the next input and outreach sessions, she'll be involved there, helping to support us. Has done an outstanding job. She's not formally on the committee, but that round of applause was also for Gretchen. She has really helped to keep this thing moving in the right direction, because there are other projects actually happening with the town at this point too, so thank you, Gretchen. Lily, obviously this is going to become a real project with real dollars attached to it, and the finance director needs to be involved as we go through that to make sure we're keeping tight budgets and we're on track and that we're considering all the things that lead us up to bond authorization. So the next consideration would be for the select board to consider formalizing the folks that are listed here as the building committee to move this project all the way through at this point.
Typically, there are terms for these committees. What's the term in years that you expect this committee?
That is a great question. It is certainly my hope that we can deliver a project that the community feels confident in when we reach the budget process this year and into the town meeting of May of '24. I think I hope that we have an affirmative vote. I hope we can do proud by the community and deliver something that we can get behind. I don't know if it's going to go through the first try. I have no idea. So I can't really truly answer that question at this point, Bill. I am very optimistic we're going to do a good job and get us through to May 24. But I think we're going to need to reassess that question as we get a little closer to the budget this year.
Why don't we set a limit of 3 years, and I'll give you plenty of time.
Okay.
Is that your motion?
I move that we formalize a committee, a building committee, fire station building committee.
I'll second that. Any objections from the audience, or?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Is there anything that says what the committee is actually responsible for?
Yes, sir, there is.
Cool.
We can jump to that before you vote if you like. There you have it.
Okay.
I think with a project like this, things will continue to evolve. I think at the very top end of this, the committee will provide oversight, from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, oversight and guidance to the select board working with the staff. I'll start at the bottom. Advise the select board on project timing. My intent is that if the building committee is not satisfied that we have done what we need to do prior to the budget, the building committee would make the recommendation to advance the project or not, without staff vote. They'll grade us on our work, and I suppose their own work to a certain degree supporting the staff. If the board's comfortable with that, I think it's up to the building committee to decide whether it even makes the budget process this year if we've made the milestones and targets. There's a lot of other work that's going to need to happen as well. Advising and assisting with outside funding and fundraising efforts. We're sort of hinted on some of that. That work will begin in earnest. If there's any ways we can sort of augment what we're expecting for bonds, we're going to be working on that, digging into that. There's been some interest from some of the committee members to get involved in that work. Consulting with green energy groups, also green energy providers, working with obviously the architects on that, so, providing input from those groups back to the building committee to the architect team. Supporting and advising on public input strategies and sessions. Receiving staff updates and advising on project milestones and budgets. Assisting with project messaging for public outreach. Meeting with professional service providers as needed. And again, advising the select board on the project timing. I think it really needs to be a recommendation from the building committee whether or not there's a comfort level to advance the project. And I suppose in a certain sense that gives them all the authority over my work as well, which I'm perfectly comfortable with, because if the building committee isn't satisfied, I can't imagine the community is going to be particularly satisfied. And there could be 12 more bullet points by the time we're done. This is a group, as it's already been alluded to, that is very willing to get into the work and make suggestions and have strong convictions about how the directions of things should go. And I try to be the type of person that listens to those and incorporates those into my work. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but that's sort of how I've seen from what we've learned and how I've got this framed at this point.
Knowing this, last chance to back out before we finalize this vote.
Well, all this information will be up on our town website, I presume.
Yes.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for it.
Was that part of authorizing Seth? Oh, no, never mind.
I did
We
that.
did that.
Yeah.
I believe you did take a vote on that.
Yeah.
And I already mentioned all these points here because I kind of jumped ahead. I think that might have been my last slide. There you have it. Happy to take any more questions if there are any. Otherwise, again, I'd say huge appreciation to everybody that's been involved, and I'm looking forward to advancing this further at this point.
Nicely done.
It's starting to get exciting again.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. All right. We're going to hear about the EECBG grant application.
Yes, so EECBG stands for Energy Efficiency Community Development Block Grant. That is a program that was part of the infrastructure bill. That money is now available and is being very aggressively sought after by many communities and organizations. We got a very positive response, finally, once their team was able to look at the letter, which outlined the basic scope of what we would intend with this grant. We did get a positive response, so that encouraged us to go forward with the next steps. At this point, I'd really like to just turn it over to Bob. He and Dory and the rest of the prep team really put together the package, which is in two parts. So if you'd like to describe.
Sure, I can talk a little bit.
Yep.
This is a Department of Energy program under which $8 million are available altogether. We have an advantage in that we are located in one of the 10 least populous states. And we are eligible because we are not one of the 10 most populous municipalities in New Hampshire. They get a formula grant based on their population. The rest of us have to fend for ourselves through this process. We submitted the concept paper in early June. That's what Nicole was referring to, and we were encouraged to proceed to a full application. The basic idea of the proposal is to expand the current building electrification pilot project that is going on right now in Peterborough with the assistance of Block Power. And so we are proposing to continue that for 3 more years. We're just doing 10 to 15 buildings this year. The grant would enable us to do at least 175 buildings, we believe, over the course of those 3 years. The main financial components of our proposal are money for Block Power services in getting this project going and providing the technical expertise that they've developed over 10 years of doing this kind of work in towns and cities around the country. We also have at least $200,000 set for financial assistance to low and middle income residents or building owners to help them take advantage of this project if they don't have the financial resources themselves to do it all by themselves. This would not pay for the entire project for anybody, but it would take a chunk out of the cost for those people who are eligible. Another component of this is continuing and expanding a workforce development effort that PrEP has begun with the assistance of the Max Makerspace and the Lakes Region Community College, which is already teaching building science courses that lead to certification as an energy auditor. And we also have in mind that we would initiate some courses for HVAC installers to design and install heat pump systems. The proposal, so I should say that the concept paper proposed a total grant of $500,000. We are more likely to be successful if we involve other communities. And to that end, we have been talking with several other towns in the general vicinity, the most likely of which to join with us is Harrisville. They're going to meet with a representative from Block Power who will be in town tomorrow, and then their select board will be deciding on Thursday if they want to go with us on this proposal. If they do, that would have a couple of benefits. One is we would increase the amount requested to $700,000. And it's also likely that we could involve the Southwest Regional Planning Commission in helping to manage the grant, which would be very helpful to town staff. It would take some load off of them in managing this federal grant. The application is due on August 7th. So what we are seeking right now is the authorization from the select board to proceed with that application. And that would entail you providing a letter of commitment that would be part of the application saying you support this grant, you'll do what's needed to make it happen in Peterborough and perhaps and in Harrisville for their select board.
What happens if we don't get this grant?
Then we don't do that project. We'll look for other ways to do it. And I'd have to say that the likelihood is that we won't. There are a lot of other, just in the process of talking with other towns, we've heard of their own projects that they were planning to submit for. I'm sure there's a lot of competition for this. The likelihood is we won't get it. I'd say the process has been very helpful in that we have strengthened relationships or established relationships with energy committees and select board members in these other towns so that that might bear fruit in some future grant application.
Great. Any other questions?
It is helpful that we already have an ongoing project through Block Power. It's a 1.5-year period and it's limited in its scope, but if we can extend that, that might be something that they'll find encouraging. And again, I'd like to thank Bob and Dory in particular for working on this project. spending a lot of time writing grants and a lot more time
I
providing.
don't think that will end anytime soon.
And Nicole, of course, has been involved in the
Yeah,
process.
Nicole and Danica.
Good job.
Any other questions? All right. I'd make a motion that we move forward with the grant application as stated.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks Bob, thank the committee, thank everybody involved.
Thank you very much. And Bill, I should say, as the liaison to PrEP, has been very involved in this as well, and particularly with the workforce development effort.
Got a meeting coming up this Friday, so.
It's just a reminder, select board members not only sit here every Tuesday or whenever it is, but we have our liaison duties that are running around to committees and meetings and everything we can possibly learn to act as a cohesive body, throughout the town. So, thanks. All right. Mr. Michael McGill is here, potential alternate member of the planning board. Hi, welcome.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to just briefly introduce yourself and then Dave?
I'm the new guy in town. Wife and I retired out of Northern Virginia in December of 2020. Purchased a home out on Carley Road. My background is I'm a 40-year federal employee, 20 of which was the United States Air Force. The reason I'm in New Hampshire is because of United States Air Force. My first duty station was Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth. When they took me dragging, kicking, screaming out of New Hampshire, sent me to Germany, I vowed that I would get back to New Hampshire. It took me 40 years, but here I am. My background, although my background is in the government, being aircraft maintenance, computer systems, communications, international relations through the Patent and Trademark Office, which was my civil service job. I got very involved in boards, in committees, and this is a little, it's my application to be a member of the planning board was somewhat biased. For many of you know, there is a proposed development on Carley Road, and I am the abutter. I have a number of homes that are proposing to be built along the border of my property. So I got involved. I recognized the need for the rights of a property owner to develop their property, but at the same time, through the planning committee, and I learned a lot just as during that process. Planning committee serves as such of an important role, ensuring that development is ethical, is cognizant of the needs of the community, of the environment, and so it just drove me to want to be more involved, and I've been able to spend some time mostly remotely with this committee and the Conservation Committee, and just found that, and I had alluded to it earlier, lived all over the world, Europe and far Middle East, and this is, in 2.5 years I've fallen in love with, and this is home, and I just want to be a part of the continued development of Peterborough, the way it has been developing, and still the quaint, quiet town that I fell in love with.
Well, thank you for volunteering. You'll learn quite a lot on the planning board.
He's already at all the meetings. And just to want to be an alternate after going to the meetings is quite a bit.
They did wonder why I wanted to be part of the committee.
Well,
It's a big commitment, so.
the fact that you come right out and say that the reason you were going to it was because you were against a certain development, like, to your credit, for not trying to sneak anything in. And if having a specific idea in mind about how things should happen precluded anybody from becoming on any boards, then we wouldn't have anybody on any boards.
Is that your motion to?
Yes, I'd like to shorten it.
All right, I'll second that. You know, thank you for volunteering. Of course, you know, the town gets a lot out of volunteer work, so. All those in favor?
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, you wouldn't know it. We've been in a drought for how many years now? But it seems like we snapped right out of that. Do we need this well? I mean,
Yes. Don't change your mind now. We've already cleared all the trees out of the way. Yes,
Right.
no, this is a great project. As you alluded to, we started developing the Coldstone Springs well site with the town of Jaffrey in partnership. Number of years ago, this is a project that was started by Rodney Bartlett, my predecessor, when he was still a public works director prior to his service as town administrator here. He carried this through some very interesting times and committees, got some great funding for us from the state of New Hampshire. This is a first of its kind project. It crosses not only the borders of 3 towns, the wells are located in the towns of Sharon and Jaffrey, but also 2 counties, which makes all of this all the more interesting for us. So we're here finally with a proposed agreement, the Interconnection Operations and Management Agreements. This is essentially the framework for how the 2 communities will work together to run this well and distribute the water between our communities. It's still pretty open-ended, which it needs to be at this point since we don't even have a building to look at yet. We do have the wells are already there. They've been tested and retested and have some of the cleanest water around here. So we're looking forward to tapping that in, but we really need this framework for the management. So the committee will be formed of 8 members, 4 from each committee, or each community. They'll include 2 people from each of the town staff. They'll include town selectmen, and we will never have an agreement unless we can get a majority, including people from the other community, to go along with it. And we've done that way by design, so no one community is going to be able to influence how the place is managed.
Is this the committee I volunteered?
This is the one you volunteered for.
That'd be the one.
Yeah, yeah. Jaffrey's already approved of this. They went to their July meeting last week, and so I have a signed copy here that I'm hoping that you'll add your signatures to.
On the note of it being the first of its kind, the first time that 2 municipalities got together on a water source.
No. Shared ownership of the water source. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Shared ownership of
That's-
the water source, yes.
I meant 2 municipalities
Yeah.
being involved in the same water source.
Yeah.
But thank you for
Yeah.
correcting me.
Sorry, it's,
I was way off.
sorry.
But it's the first of its kind definitely in the state
Yes.
and maybe anywhere. So like to Rodney's credit, this was something that he cooked up in his mind and has gotten tons more funding because of it.
Yes.
And I can say already that when you sent that contract for us to review, I was horrified because, both with lawyers creating contracts between 2 towns. And I read it, I was like, it's got to be the most straightforward and to the point contract.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I was blown away in a good way.
Now, you mentioned the town of Sharon. They're not participating in the project.
No,
It's crossing some of their land. but-
it is,
But
it
they don't have
is,
municipal water.
It's on there.
they do not have
We're
municipal
buying it.
water. Yeah. They don't have direct access to it. There's no road, no town of Sharon road that goes to it. It's landlocked from their side. We are paying taxes, though, to the town of Sharon on this property. So,
Yeah.
kind of
Thanks for bringing
interesting.
that up.
Is there any chance for Peterborough to grow a little bit in that corner and have it become our land?
Well, I
Or all of
mean,
Sharon, we did purchase it. I do own the land.
Let's get through this project first.
Yeah, we're not talking about annexing
Sharon?
yet, are we?
I explored that possibility recently, just taking Sharon over. They haven't got much defense.
True.
All right.
We just have to work on our army.
All right, I'd make a motion that we,
I have a question.
Question.
Sorry, Ellen's. Is in the agreement how the water is apportioned itself? Is that anything part of it? Because I don't know what the agreement is really, and I don't need to know.
So it's essentially an as needed. The wells will be run and the water will be divvied up as needed, and then the cost of maintaining the wells will be divided up based on how much water is drawn.
Which is the most important part of it. So like, if Jaffrey uses 1 million gallons and we use 300,000, we're only paying for our share of what gets used.
user fees, just like,
But we do have basically our water department will be operating it so that, and will be, compensated for
Yep.
that.
Both departments will have skin in the game, for
Yeah.
sure. But where we have the larger water department at this time, it made the most sense for Peterborough to manage it ourselves.
anyone else? All right.
I heard a motion, right?
Yeah, I started a motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Another great step forward.
Okay? And this is here for you to sign when you're ready.
All right. Do we really want this $25,000?
Seth, you want to talk
We
about
really
it?
do. We want our new water connection for redundancy, but we want to protect the water we already have as well. And that's the purpose of this grant. I already presented on this. This is sort of a refresher. We have been awarded the grant. Governor and council sent it back. We are good to authorize and move forward on this project. I'll give you a couple bullet points on what we're going to be doing here. Excuse me. So Peterborough's current, I'll just read from my grant application. Might as well, why reinvent it, right? Peterborough's current public water supply is entirely dependent, until this goes online, upon 3 production wells known as the North Well, the Tarbell Well, and the Summer Street Well. All 3 of these wells are located in close proximity to each other. The cost to replace a production well, if you would like to look at the Cold Springs budget with me, I'd be happy to do that on the side. It's quite expensive to put one of these in, is incredibly substantial, but the cost to protect the wells you already have is not. And that's essentially what this is. The work scope has been structured such that the 3 existing production wells can be investigated at the same time, and the initial tasks that will be funded with this grant are as followed. A detailed geological mapping to evaluate the thickness. A detailed geological mapping that identifies various stratified drift deposits and aquifer boundaries on the ground level. Geophysical surveys that evaluate the thickness and lateral extent of the aquifer deposits from which groundwater is withdrawn. A detailed contamination threat survey conducted within 3,000 feet of each production well. Assessment of the availability and usability of existing monitoring wells and residential wells that can be used for monitoring during upcoming long-term pumping test programs. Design of a long-term pumping test program that will lead to the final determination of a scientifically defensible wellhead protection for each production well. So essentially we're doing the exploratory work to understand how much we have, where it's recharged from, and then scientifically defensible information so that we can protect those areas and make sure that development is being responsible and that we're being responsible as a community to protect what we already have. Presently, that doesn't exist.
So $25,000 covered all that?
25,000 is 50% match. The other 25,000 will come from the utilities budget.
Anyone else have any questions? Carol?
Carol Nelson, West Peterborough. So Seth, you're saying the town has never done this in the past?
As far as I know, that
Yeah.
we have not developed a scientifically defensible wellhead protection area. I know there's been some exploratory work. I know there's been some zoning overlays and some different parameters that have been put on mapping, but we do not have a scientifically defensible wellhead protection area.
So if you get this grant, how quickly would that information be complete and
I have to
available?
look back through, we developed a scope. We'll go out for contracted services to aid us with the work. I hate to be quoted on this because I didn't actually anticipate that question. The work will begin immediately. I believe we'll start seeing the preliminary work coming back this fall. I'll amend that comment to you in email if I got that wrong.
Okay. That's pretty quick, though.
They're ready to
Are
go.
you expecting any surprises?
Hopefully not.
Whoa, whoa.
You can't, they wouldn't be surprised.
That's true.
Well, the technology has to have come leaps and bounds
Yeah.
recently as well, so they could have developed this not being able to see through the ground like they can now.
No, but they would have done test pits, I'm assuming. Yeah, so. I think this is awesome. Will it be in the GIS eventually?
Yeah, absolutely.
That GIS that we don't want to get rid of, right?
I certainly don't.
We want to get rid of
Quite valuable to my work.
Rick Lessig.
Rick, yeah.
The town responsibility of 25,000, is that coming out of something that's already been budgeted?
Yeah, we have some discretionary use for professional services in the utilities budget that we build into the budget each year. That's my intent, is to use that money for this project this year.
Did we, we have a motion yet? right?
Nope.
motion to accept.
No. Yeah, there you go. All those in favor? Aye. Yeah, great. Thank you. All right. Lastly, minutes from June 6th and June 27th. Can I say written? I'll make a motion to accept them as written.
I'll second, go ahead.
Excellent. All in favor? Aye. Great. Anybody?
You know how great it is to have a meeting where you get so much really important stuff happening?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you call it that June 16th.
Everybody, yeah.
Thank you for everyone for coming.
Thank you. All right, so
Always good to see you.
who's making our motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, that's my
All right.
favorite.
Awesome.
We can leave whatever you folks decide.
Yeah.
I've been doing engineering through the summer.
You'll send me the copy of the
Yeah,
presentation?